I'm Edward Rapunski. I'm privileged and honored to be the chair of the jury for the Canadian Jewish Literary Awards. Welcome to the 6th successful year for the Canadian Jewish Literary Awards. It's a different experience this year because our celebration gala is online, and we are glad you found us. The Canadian Jewish Literary Awards is a celebration. It celebrates and recognizes and rewards the finest Canadian Jewish writing on subjects with Jewish themes or with significant Jewish content by Canadian authors or permanent residents of Canada. The awards has grown in stature every year and become a cornerstone in the Canadian Jewish community's cultural calendar. Culture is a major measure of the vibrancy of Jewish life in Canada. The Canadian Jewish Literary Awards contributes to the health of that communal culture by promoting not just Jewish writers and editors, but Jewish ideas, creativity, and scholarship. Honoring the best Jewish books of the year in the various genres allows us to better understand ourselves and our collective past, our shared present, and the uncertain world of the future. The Canadian Jewish Literary Awards is honoring 9 outstanding books for 2020. You will meet Edeet Ravel, the author of A Boy Is Not a Bird for youth literature, Abraham Boyarsky, the author of Through Shadows Flow for fiction, poet Elana Wolff for her book Swoon, historian Derek Penslar, who wrote a biography of Theodor Herzl in history, Josh Lambert and Ilan Stavans, who compiled How Yiddish Changed America and How America Changed Yiddish in the Yiddish category, Jewish philosopher David Novak, who wrote Athens and Jerusalem in scholarship, Tanhum, Yoreh, who wrote Waste Not, a Jewish environmental ethics in the Jewish thought and culture category, Laurent Sagelovich, who wrote the Holocaust novel Le Temps des Orphelins, and Hernan, Tesler-Mabé, who wrote a biography of Heinz Unger, Mahler's Forgotten Conductor. The depth and breadth of the books shows the vibrancy of the culture and the appeal of Jewish themes for fiction and non-fiction writers. While the cash value of the prize we are giving out this afternoon is significant for the writers, it's the reputation and standing of this jury that underscores its importance. The award winners are going to be doing most of the talking and the reading this afternoon, and the members of the jury will be doing the introductions. I'd like to introduce the distinguished jury. Rona Arado is an award-winning author of 15 children's and youth books. Miriam Borden is a PhD student in Yiddish at the University of Toronto, an oral history fellow at the Yiddish Book Center, and an exhibition curator. Ilan Goldschlager is the former director of the Holocaust Literature Research Institute and professor of French at Western University, and the former chair of the National Task Force for Holocaust Education, Remembrance, and Research. David Kaufman is the J. Richard Schiff Chair for the Study of Canadian Jewry at the Israel and Golda Kashitsky Center for Jewish Studies at York University. Michael Posner is the award-winning author, playwright, and the author of the forthcoming book, Leonard Cohen, Untold Stories, which will be out this week. Adam Saul is the author of 4 books of poetry and 1 book of essays, How a Poem Moves. He teaches at Victoria College, University of Toronto. Once again, the Israel and Golda Kashitsky Center for Jewish Studies at York University has played a vital role in helping us present the Canadian Jewish Literary Award. I'd like to recognize the valuable contribution of coordinator Julie Feinberg. I want to acknowledge our donors, our benefactors, our supporters, and the members of the community who have helped us. Through the generosity of a handful of generous patrons, we have managed to raise the funds to sustain the awards program. I want to especially recognize the Gerald Sheff and Shanitha Kashan Charitable Foundations, the Asper Foundation, the Tikkun 18 Foundation, and the Yiddish Committee of the UJA Federation. This afternoon is free, and we are inclusive. We would like you to partner with us. Building a more robust donor base would allow us to increase the value of the prizes to winners, to attract more entries, welcome larger audience, and in turn, do more to promote Jewish culture in Canada. Click on how to donate on our website. And now to present our first award, here is Rona Arado.
Hello, my name is Rona Arado, and I'm delighted to present the winner of this year's Youth Award for the Canadian Jewish Literary Awards. It's Edeet Ravel, whose book A Boy Is Not a Bird, published by Groundwood Books in Canada. The story was inspired by her teacher. I think it was her fifth grade teacher. It's his story of how his life changed when the Nazis occupied his town in Soviet Ukraine. Up until that point, Nat's life was very, very happy. He was quite excited when his family decided not to immigrate to Canada when they had the chance. Unfortunately, things changed very rapidly when the Nazis came in, and everyone in the town, the Jewish instituted, first they instituted Jewish laws, and then they exiled the Jews plus other people to Siberia. The book ends on a cliffhanger, leaving us all wanting more, which I'm happy to say will be in Edeet's next volume, the follow-up to Boy Is Not a Bird. It's an excellent book, and I'm going to introduce you now to Edeet, who's going to tell us more about it. Thank you.
The story of A Boy Is Not a Bird begins in Eastern Europe in 1939. 10-year-old Nat lives with his parents in a small town called Zastavna. We first meet Nat playing with his best friend Max in Max's front yard. In the middle of their game, Max's mother comes out of the house and tells Nat that he'd better go home. Nat can tell something is wrong, and he becomes even more alarmed when he notices that the streets are deserted. There's absolutely no one around. And the reason no one is around is that everyone is glued to the radio. Germany and Russia have just signed a non-aggression pact, and Zastavna is now going to become Russian. This means new teachers for Nat. It also means that Nat's father is going to be arrested and sent to one of Stalin's notorious Gulag prisons, and that Nat and his mother will then be exiled to Siberia. But of course, Nat doesn't know any of this yet. In this chapter, Nat attends his first day of school under the Soviets. A skinny man walks into our classroom. He looks scared of us, scared of the classroom, scared of his own shadow. We all start giggling. What a relief. We don't have to be scared of a teacher who's scared of us. Right behind our new teacher, there's a poster of a man with a friendly mustache holding a cute little kid. Our teacher leans against the wall without saying a word. Every few seconds, he glances at the door as if he's expecting someone to come and rescue him. And that's what happens. The door opens, and in marches a woman who is the exact opposite of the timid man. She looks strong and healthy and sturdy. She's wearing a pretty dress, and there's a small picnic basket on her arm. All our teachers so far have been strict. But this woman acts as if she's an older sister who adores us. "I'm Comrade Martha," she says in Ukrainian. "Welcome to your new school, where we are going to learn to be good citizens so we can do our duty and serve our leader." She turns to the poster of the man with the mustache. "This is our great leader and father, Comrade Stalin, and he has a little present for you." She lifts the lid of her basket and hands out candy canes. This is definitely our lucky day. More good news follows. There is absolutely no hitting of children allowed in this school. Our glorious leader loves children. You are our future. And I know you all want to be pioneers. Whoever misbehaves loses that chance and will be very sad because no one will want to be friends with that little boy or girl." Then, without warning, Comrade Martha raises both her arms and her basket slides down to her shoulder. She looks so funny, with the basket dangling there next to her ear and her arms up in the air as if she's Moses parting the Red Sea. But no one dares to laugh. "Long live the great Stalin," she shouts in Russian. And we all do our best to repeat after her, "Long live the great Stalin." After Martha leaves, Comrade Minsky asks us to say our names one by one. But we can tell that he isn't really listening. To my amazement, a tear rolls down his cheek. I've never seen a teacher cry. I've never even seen a grown-up man cry. Lucy raises her hand. "Are you homesick?" Comrade Minsky is so startled by her question, he staggers backwards a little. She obviously got it right.
I'm Edward Trapunski, and I'm pleased to present the 2020 Canadian Jewish Literary Award to Abraham Boyarsky for his novel Through Shadows Slow. Through Shadows Slow is a love story about memory and forgiveness. Set after the Holocaust, Daniel, a survivor of the Nazi prison camps, is diagnosed with tuberculosis and is sent to a renowned sanatorium in the Laurentian Mountains. He meets and falls in love with a more assimilated woman who grew up in Canada. He marries her, but he's haunted by doubts about her fidelity because of her worldly nature. In the twilight of his life, he finds salvation and redemption on the Israeli fortress at Masada. Professor Boyarsky, the father of 13 children, is the author of 9 novels and 36 short stories. He's also professor of mathematics and statistics at Concordia University in Montreal. In 1989, he founded a Cégep, a pre-university college with the goal of offering Hasidic men a secular education, and he owns a hotel. Where does he find the time? Professor Boyarsky will read from his book, Through Shadows Slow, and then I will have a conversation with him about his book and his life as a writer. Professor Boyarsky, how does it feel to you to win this award? What does it mean for you?
I feel honored and grateful for the recognition, but another feeling also enters my thoughts. I'm reminded of our pediatrician when our children were growing up. His doctor married late in life, and his children also married late in life. So by the time he was a grandfather, he was already in his 80s. And he would say to us, "I'm too old to be a grandfather." We found that rather funny. Of course, you can never be too old to be a grandfather. In some sense, I feel I'm a little bit old for this award, but of course, I'm happy to receive it.
I summarized the book early on in my introduction to you, but I'm wondering if you could summarize it by telling me what themes you were trying to bring out, what the inside look, the meaning of the book is for you and for the readers who are going to be reading this.
Okay, perhaps I'll give a brief outline of the storyline. Daniel, the twilight of his life, comes to Israel to make peace with his wife, to forgive her for her supposed infidelities. They still rankle within him. But by some turn of events, Daniel finally discovers the truth and is still challenged to release his deep-rooted false beliefs in her. He only accomplishes that later when he climbs Masada. So, I mean, the novel is about how little incidents in life can blow up to become major issues. This reminds me of the butterfly effect in the mathematical subject that I study, chaos theory, where a butterfly fluttering its wings in Tokyo, Japan, causes a hurricane in Florida 4 or 5 days later. This is called nonlinear effects, where little things become amplified to the point that they become catastrophic. I tried to capture that in a literary way in this novel, where a little glimpse on the beach by Daniel, which leads him to suspect her, becomes paramount in his life. It affects him and the family that he started in a very dramatic way. He's convinced of what he saw, doesn't even ask for explanations, and leads his life like that. And until the very end, he finds out the truth.
Is that sort of the Jewish theme, of the theme of redemption?
Yes, but redemption from himself, from his own predisposition to judge her very unfavorably. And this takes him a long time to overcome.
Now, you've written a number of books, and I've read some of them, and this one is different than the other books that you've written. And I'm wondering what the process of writing this book was like. Was it different than the other books that you've written, the stories you've written?
This was difficult, this one. All the other ones proceed in a chronological order. This one starts at the end virtually. I've always wanted to start a book on page 196 and have the feeling right away that I've already written half the book, and then the rest goes downstream. And so this book starts at the end, briefly in Jerusalem, and then the middle part, which is the long part, takes place in the north in the early 50s. A lot of survivors came in the summers to meet there, and that's the setting for the novel, the main setting. Then at the end, we return to Jerusalem and his climb to Masada. So it's structurally different. I must confess I had a lot of difficulty in structuring it, and I did have crucial input from former editor, Ed Carson. He sort of helped me organize the material in a way that it all fell into place.
You've had a very full life, and how did you find time to write this book? You do so many things. You're a professor of mathematics. You started a CEGEP. You're really involved in your spiritual life. You have 13 children. How do you ever have the time to write a novel?
Just show you something. This is a book I wrote in 1997. It's called The Laws of Chaos. I live a life of chaos, but there are laws behind them. So my days are structured. I take a lot of notes during the school year when I'm teaching and doing research, and I reserve writing time for the summer. We have a country place north of Montreal, also in the Laurentians, and that's when I write. I write intensely, and I write perhaps 10 hours a day during the summer months, and it takes me 4 or 5 summers to complete a novel. So, and
finally, I'd like to address the people who are going to be reading the book. What's in it for them? What do you, how do you expect they would react to it? And also within your own Hasidic community, how are they going to respond to a story that is in a lot of ways secular?
Fortunately for me, most people in the Hasidic community don't read novels. They don't read literature. Otherwise, I'd probably be excommunicated, put into cherem. I don't know. That's the word for it. So, and I don't. Most people don't even know that I write. I do write checkbooks for them to some extent, but I don't. They don't think. They don't know that I write novels. So I'm happy for that. What can the reader get out of this? Be careful with the little things in your life. give another person a second chance. Don't make judgments until you're absolutely sure. The main character of the novel was absolutely convinced of something that he had only glimpsed in the darkness. Really, that's what happened. But I guess his war experience predisposed him for such an outlook that he could not forget and he could not forgive, even in the face of certain facts. I suppose that's what bias is all about. And it took him a long, long time to really forgive and forget and to start his own life over again at an old age.
Could you give us a taste, Professor Boyarsky? Could you read something from your book?
Yes, I will. Thank you. Gila and Daniel, the two main characters of the book, had one son whose name is Benjamin. How I worried over every detail of the boy's life, never explaining to him the demons that controlled my actions. I would virtually force-feed Benjamin, as if by feeding him, I was feeding the starving children I had seen succumb in the camps. By any logic, Benjamin should have grown into a neurotic adult, not the unruffled eye surgeon and happily married family man he has become. He is definitely your son. As Benjamin grew older, his features confirmed my worst fears, that I was not in his genes. I see Benjamin, a toddler with a red hat and large white bonbon on top, as I trundle him through the autumn streets of Saint Agathe. He points to the sky with its myriad of little disjoint white clouds and cries out perceptively, "Puzzle, puzzle." The special bond between you and him was never more apparent to me than on a day in October when Benjamin was 4 years old. You're sitting on a bench while Benjamin climbs to the top of a slide in the playground on Fletcher's Field. You throw an imaginary rope to him, which he catches laughingly. Then you slowly pull the rope toward you, one hand after the other, while Benjamin holds the other end with both hands, allowing himself to be drawn down the slide by the invisible rope between mother and son. I watch enviously from a distance. I wanted to be that rope, to join your friendship. I know you would have allowed it, but I was afraid to love.
Thank you, Professor Boyarsky.
Thank you.
The winner in the poetry category of the Canadian Jewish Literary Awards this year is Swoon by Elana Wolff. Swoon is a collection that explores a variety of subjects, but returns again and again to our longing for transcendence. Informed by Jewish texts and contexts, with a sure-handed control of language and image, the poems are passionate but mature, precise and curious, willing to risk everything for a chance to slip behind the curtain of the familiar to get a glimpse of the divine.
I'd like to extend my heartfelt thanks to the Israel and Golda Kashitsky Center for Jewish Studies at York University, to the jurors of the 2020 Canadian Jewish Literary Awards, to you in particular, Adam Saul, to Michael Marola, Connie McParland, Anna Van Valkenburg, and the staff at Guernica Editions. To you, Julie Feinberg at the Center for Jewish Studies, for directing the recording of this presentation, and to my very dear ones, you know who you are. It's quite lovely to have one's work recognized. Okay, I'd like to read two poems. The first poem, Ovarian, is framed as a recollection that tells something about marriage, Jewish marriage, mine, motherhood, faith, going under. That's part of the Swoon theme, and faith in crisis. Ovarian. What do I remember of that cardinal time of life? What some might call zodiacal. Aries, Cancer in the balance, wanting on and on to go, maybe, as they say, till 120. The children, still so young, the fluff of their favorite flannel pajamas in our nostrils, in our bed. I read somewhere that inner organs glow, deep pink and jiggly, all except the ovaries. They're dull and gray and pitted by release of every egg. The older the woman, the duller and grayer the organs. But it was spring, and I was also young. Was it that we heard a quack and found a mother duck inside the shrub beside our driveway, sitting on her eggs so far removed from any water? The three of us recoiled. She left the nest. That's what I remember from the time before the tests, and lying in the corridor on operation day, patients in the hall on gurneys, all of us lined up. I remember saying that I think it's just the start. You were standing by my side, gripping the crook of my arm till they came to take me. You'll be in the waiting room, I said, that windowless cube, joking just a little for reprieve. Your being there will make me right, is what I didn't say. Like when you blow the candles on a cake and make a wish. Okay, I'll read another husband and wife poem, which is also a fish poem. Little bit of background. I've been on a Franz Kafka quest for several years now, and there are a number of Franz Kafka themed poems in this collection. This one revisits a trip that my husband and I took to Třešť in the Czech Republic, a small town that Kafka frequently visited to see his favorite uncle, Siegfried, titled Surfacing Behavior. Venaský pond, Třešť, Czech Republic. The pond alive with them, leaping, thwacking like paddles upon re-entry. The sound of it loud and out of the blue. You don't expect these fish, they look like carp, to breach like humpbacks. You don't expect this tranquil water to clap. I like the way you call from the car, roused as much as I am by the action. I am at the pond side with the camera, poised to shoot the proof. Swans are on the water also, whites and pale gray juveniles approaching. It's possible I've never had an accurate sense of distance, which is to say, I fear their teeth on my toes. I snap the jumpers, fish at once so fully of the water, oddly not. I capture golden bodies aloft, mid-wriggle, gleeful in the leaping, or at least it seems to me. Maybe it's display, a sign. Perhaps they're on their way to whale with imminent lungs and blowholes. It's possible I've never had an accurate sense of mystery, which is to say, their realness is their glee. The swans emerging at the grass back me to the Škoda you haven't left. Anyhow, we're good to go. We've seen the small Czech town where young Franz Kafka came in summer to visit his uncle Siegfried, country doctor of Třešť, at that time Třešť. Lay naked by the pond, he wrote, rode his uncle's motorcycle, herded cows and goats, played quoits, fell for a short-sighted girl by way of her fat, foreshortened legs, and went to temple. Thank you.
It gives me great pleasure to present the Canadian Jewish Literary Award for Best Book in the category of History to Derek Penslar for his work Theodor, Herzl, the Charismatic Leader, published by Yale University Press. Professor Penslar taught at the U of T for many years and now splits his time between Toronto and Cambridge, Massachusetts, where he teaches at Harvard. His previous books include Jews and the Military, A History, and Shylock's Children, Economics and Jewish Identity in Modern Europe. Professor Penslar, the jury found your book thoroughly engaging, deeply insightful, and pristinely erudite, yet entirely readable. For a historical figure about whom hundreds of thousands of pages have already been written, this book is all the more remarkable for the ways that it draws together different methodological approaches, at times deep into the biographical and psychological details of this cosmopolitan intellectual, and at times attuned to the diverse perspectives of a truly diverse group of modern Jews who related to and were inspired to action by his writings. Professor Penslar, you have managed to synthesize a fractious and overdetermined debate about Herzl in a judicious manner, a truly important task for the historian today. The only difficulty our jury had with your book was deciding which category it would win for, history, biography, or Jewish thought and culture, since it fits so readily into each. We hope the book is widely read and engaged with by a host of readers in the many conversations about Zionism and Israel afoot in our country and worldwide. Congratulations again, Professor Penslar.
Thank you, David. Thank you to the other members of the jury. It is a tremendous honor to have been given this award. And what makes me especially happy about it is that the jury recognizes the contributions of so many scholars before me who have written on Herzl and on early Zionism, and that, yes, as they say, I am standing on the shoulder of giants, and yet I did try to bring something new to the biography, and I'm glad that you found it enjoyable. Herzl is the subject of dozens of biographies, but they have fallen into, I would think, a couple of extreme varieties. There are those that mythologize him and that romanticize him into something larger than life, but in a way they do him a disservice because he was a human being. And it's precisely his frailties as a human being that help make his greatness all the more interesting. But there are also works about Herzl that don't just acknowledge his many foibles, and he was a troubled and difficult man, but they revel in them. And I didn't want to do either. I wanted to write a book about a complicated man, a man who was troubled, and yet who knew how to confront his troubles and deal with them and channel his desires and his energies into something not just constructive, but something truly great. And this is why I found the book so fascinating. At first, I thought it would be an easy thing to simply review some of his standard published writings, but the more I got into it, I realized that despite all that's been written on Herzl, there are many letters, many archival documents, many important sources that haven't been used. And it's not just a question of sources for their own sake. They're sources from people who knew Herzl and the exchange between them, because that's one of the most important things I wanted to do in the book, is to understand the dialogic nature of great leadership, the dialogic nature of charisma. That if Herzl had been born in the year 1980 or 1990 in Toronto, he might not have achieved greatness at all. He was the right man in the right place and at the right time. And if he became a great leader and a great charismatic, it's because his following needed a leader and a charismatic. A final mystery that I have tried to solve in the book and that I hope I've helped illuminate for readers is how this man, who was an upper middle class, Viennese, bourgeois, assimilated Jew, became a global sensation, a celebrity, having meetings with the German Kaiser, the British foreign minister, the Austrian minister's president, and even the Pope. And the mystery is solved when we understand the importance of journalism in that era. And that Herzl, although his dreams to be a great playwright were never fully realized, was a truly gifted and brilliant journalist. People wanted access to him, people wanted to meet him because of his fame, but also people appreciated the greatness of his prose. And I'm very grateful that the jury has found my own book to be readable and fun to get into. But I want to tell you all what a great pleasure it was for me to read Herzl's journalistic writings in the original, not just the writings about Zionism, but his many pieces about society, about politics, about culture. If I have captured some of the complexity of this man, the depth of his accomplishments, and the beauty of his artistic talent, then I'm very happy indeed. Thank you again.
Hello, my name is Miriam Borden, and it is my distinct pleasure to present the 2020 Canadian Jewish Literary Award for the category of Yiddish. This year, the award goes to two scholars who have certainly shaped my experience of Yiddish, Josh Lambert and Ilan Stavans, for their new anthology, How Yiddish Changed America and How America Changed Yiddish. Few minority languages have so deeply impacted American speech and writing as Yiddish has over the last century. And now in the 21st century, with new generations coming to the language and considering Yiddish in fresh contexts, from RuPaul's Drag Race to feminist podcasts, a question that begs to be asked is, how did Yiddish change America? And how did America change Yiddish? And moreover, how do these processes continue? What I love about this book is the way it answers one more question. How did we get here? The selections don't only document the way Yiddish writers and thinkers have addressed issues like immigration, acculturation, language identity, and so much more. They also acknowledge that these are issues that remain interesting and urgent and elusive today. And that's what I love most about it. It's truly an anthology of Yiddish for today.
Thank you so much, Miriam. Thank you to the judges of the Canadian Jewish Literary Awards. It's a huge honor for this anthology, which we enjoyed putting together so much to receive this award.
A großen Dank. I'm very happy. Estoy muy contento. Thank you to the judges. I am from Mexico, and for me, the word America is really broad. It encompasses not only the United States and Canada, but many other Americas, and the anthology tries to reflect that plurality.
Now, of course, I'm Canadian, and so it's a special pleasure to be recognized for these awards. I also want to just note that I want to accept the award for us and the work that we did to put it together, but really for the contributors and all the people who contributed to the Yiddish Book Center's magazine, Pakenträger, over 4 decades. So much of the content in the anthology reflects the work of the Yiddish Book Center and of so many amazing scholars and writers and editors who put that magazine together for 4 decades.
In the history of the Jewish people, there have been many Jewish languages, Judo-Persian, Ladino, Judo-Portuguese, Judo-Italian. Yiddish has a particular place and has a particular power. It is a language that has, over many, many centuries, lasted, incorporated different cultures into it, and projected itself outside. It was the lingua franca of the Ashkenazi Jews, but it went beyond Ashkenaz. And the question now, in the first fourth of the 21st century, is what's the future of the Yiddish? And the hope is that the anthology will inspire people to think about these broad questions and to feel propelled forward. A language to exist needs more than nostalgia, needs the desire and the practicality. And Yiddish is resilient. Yiddish has survived. It depends on us for it to have a place in the future.
And I'll just emphasize how much I agree with what Ilan just said, that the anthology, if it has a role, I hope it's in helping people to enjoy the past of Yiddish, but to also think about the future and to see how much possibility Yiddish opened up for new ways of thinking about Jewishness, of the role of Jews in American culture and in North American culture. And I hope the anthology, for anyone who picks it up, will be a pleasure and will be confounding in certain ways and will introduce you to things that you would never have imagined would have happened in Yiddish or would have been affected by Yiddish. And I hope it'll be available to anyone who's interested in asking those kinds of questions about the language.
And to conclude, let me say that I have enjoyed enormously working with Josh Lambert, and that our vision of what a scholar does is not to isolate herself or himself in the ivory tower, but to bring back knowledge to the community, to create the infrastructure for that knowledge, to be the base for future generations to understand how history has shaped us. Knowledge is and has always been essential for the Jewish people. It is what makes us who we are. We have always been the people of the anthology, from the Bible to the Talmud to the many anthologies that we've always had. And we have always been the people of scholarship. But scholarship needs to return to the lay and the general reader. That is what we have tried to do in this anthology, and it has been such a pleasure to put it together. I'm hoping that it will be a pleasure for you as a reader also to get lost in it, to find yourself in it. A großen Dank, muchas gracias, thank you very much.
Schönen Dank.
I'm Edward Trapunski, and it is indeed a privilege to present the 2020 Canadian Jewish Literary Award for Scholarship to Athens and Jerusalem, God, Humans, and Nature by David Novak. This book, by the distinguished professor of religion and philosophy at the University of Toronto, is a true work of scholarship. It examines the intersection of Greek philosophy and Jewish theology. The subject has long been controversial because of the conflict between monotheism on one side and pluralism on the other side. But the Greek philosophers and the Jewish Talmudists were contemporaneous, if not contemporary. And Athens and Jerusalem addresses how the influences must have spread through the region and through the history of philosophy and religion. As a theologian and ethicist, and the founder and the president of the Union for Traditional Judaism, David Novak is well equipped to expound on the subject. He has written 16 books and hundreds of articles about how Jewish theology and Greek philosophy engage. And academics and scholars and everybody curious about Jewish thought will find that Athens and Jerusalem presents fresh ideas and insights.
I'm very glad to and honored to accept the award for scholarship of the Canadian Jewish Literary Award, the Canadian, for my book, Athens and Jerusalem, subtitled God, Humans, and Nature. This book was written when I received an invitation to be the Gifford Lecturer in 2017. I received this invitation close to 3 years in advance. The Gifford Lectureship, which is held at one of the 4 historic Scottish universities, in my case it was held at the University of Aberdeen, is for a philosopher probably the most prestigious recognition one can get. Philosophers as distinguished as Hannah Arendt, Reinhold Niebuhr, Paul Tillich, Michael Polanyi, and others have given this in the past. So it was a great honor, and they give you a great deal of lead time. The Gifford Lectures want you to deal with big questions. And the big question that I've been dealing with for most of my life as a student and as a rabbi and as a professor and a scholar has been the interaction of Judaism and philosophy. Many people think that the greatest challenge to Judaism comes from other religions, like Christianity and Islam. Actually, Jews had very easy answers to why they were not Christians and why they were not Muslims. But when it came to philosophy, which was not beholden to the Jewish tradition like Christianity and Islam are, we were dealing with another independent source of truth and value. So this is how I structured the lectures, and having been given so much lead time, I wrote out the lectures to a far greater extent then the actual lecture would be about, what, 1 hour. What I did was I took the full manuscript with me to Aberdeen, and I was able to arrange for my research assistant to come with me. And then what we did was, before each lecture, we went over a truncated version of the lecture that would fit in with the 1 hour slot. Then when we came back to Toronto, we took some of the feedback from the audience and then rewrote the manuscript. And what the manuscript attempts to do, what the book, I should say, attempts to do, is to deal with the challenge that philosophy has posed to Judaism. And the challenge had to be dealt with by the three main Jewish thinkers that I deal with, namely Philo of Alexandria about 2,000 years ago, Maimonides in the 12th century, and Jewish philosophers like Hermann Cohn in the early 20th century and Emmanuel Levinas in the later 20th century, had to walk in kind of a narrow path between, on the one hand, being totally combative towards philosophy, simply rejecting it as simply something that was antithetical to Judaism. On the other hand, being obsequious to it and simply saying that, well, Judaism can only say what philosophy approves, which of course then destroys the whole authority of the Jewish tradition. So this is how I dealt with it, and also dealt with it especially in dealing with the whole rabbinic tradition, which is always assumed to be anti-philosophical. And what I tried to show is that the rabbinic tradition was dealing with some of the exact same problems that philosophers were dealing with: questions of truth, questions of value, questions of justice, and that enabled there to be a dialogue between the two. That Jews can learn a great deal from philosophers, philosophers can learn a great deal from Judaism, if neither one is attempting to conquer the other or be conquered by the other. And that was helpful to me. And many people have said, well, this is kind of a drawing together of my life's work. And that it is true to a certain extent, although, please God, I should have more life and health, and I have some other things I want to write about too. But this certainly is, is a kind of a capstone of one's career. And as I say, I was, very honored to be invited to give these lectures. And I was also very honored that the Tanhum Center for Jewish Studies at the University of Toronto has a publication fund, which has enabled the University of Toronto Press to publish this book in both hardcover and paperback at a reasonable price, so that actually somebody might buy it and read it. So that is the book as it is, and as it was intended to be. And now I'm just waiting for some, critical reviews and see people's reaction. Of course, as it says in the book of Kohelet, cast your bread upon the waters, and after many days you'll see some results. So it takes a long time, but I think that the book has something to say to Jews, and I think something has to say to members of other religions that have grappled with philosophy, and has something to say to philosophers who do not consider themselves part of any religious tradition, but still respect the fact that some of the great questions that they're dealing with are also dealt with people whose main commitment is not to philosophy. That for us, philosophy is a method whereby we understand Judaism, and also a method whereby we bring insights of the Jewish tradition into pluralistic and multicultural discussions. So I'm here again grateful to the Canadian Jewish Literary Award Committee for giving me this award. And I think it bespeaks the fact that the Jewish community of Toronto has been extremely supportive, not just financially, but spiritually and by coming to our events and whatever, both here and at York, the university. And that is what has made Toronto a major center of Jewish studies. We have people coming from all over the world to work in our Jewish Studies Center, and the one at York, and I understand Ryerson is now developing one. And that support, just knowing that the community is interested in what we're doing, that the community values scholarship, and supports it both financially and personally, is gratifying. I don't think that I could have done this work or done it in the way that I wanted to do it had I been living somewhere else. Thank you.
It's my pleasure to present the 2020 Canadian Jewish Literary Awards Best Book in the category of Jewish Thought and Culture to Tanhum Yoreh for his book Waste Not, A Jewish Environmental Ethic. Tanhum is an assistant professor at the University of Toronto's School for the Environment. He's published several journal articles and book chapters on religion and the environment, faith-based ethics, consumption and waste. And Waste Not is his first monograph. It was published by the State University of New York Press this past summer. Tanhum, your work offers a well-studied and careful analysis of the Jewish prohibition against wastefulness and destruction across an impressive range of contexts and interpretive traditions, from the Hebrew Bible through rabbinic, medieval, and contemporary Jewish environmental commentaries. Your methodology is an innovative blend of traditional Jewish hermeneutics, the academic study of religion, ethics, ecological social theory, and together the jury agreed that the book achieved nothing short of an important and of course very timely meditation on a subject deserving of the world's attention over. We hope that the environmental ethic you offer in this book is widely read and that it grounds Jewish thinking and behavior and inspires further dialogue among differing faith communities as well towards a global environmental ethic that is articulated in myriad ways for myriad peoples around the one globe that we share for the years ahead. Congratulations, Professor Yoreh.
Hello. I'd just like to express my deep gratitude to the jury and to the donors of the Canadian Jewish Literary Awards. I'm deeply honored to have been awarded this prize for my book, Waste Not. The book itself was a labor of love. I started writing it as part of my doctoral studies at York University way back in 2007. I guess it wasn't then conceived of as a book, but it has become one since then. The book came into being through what might be described as sort of an intellectual puzzle for me. I consider myself to be a Jewish environmentalist, and I had come from the field of the social sciences, had a degree in environmental planning, and I was seeing how certain communities were putting into practice the concept of Bal Tashchit, the Jewish prohibition against wastefulness. And I was sort of wondering, how is it that the communities that take the halacha, the Jewish law, seriously, aren't actually practicing this prohibition as a way, in a way an environmentalist would imagine? And that sort of got me thinking, and got me thinking long and hard enough to pull off a doctoral dissertation on it, and eventually manifested itself in the book that that's now been awarded. The book itself starts with that premise. You know, we have the environmental community who deals with faith-based literature, saying, you know, either this concept of waste not is a strong environmental ethic, or it's one that doesn't really hold its weight and can't really be used. So this difference in opinion sort of even stoke the fires of interest. And what I did was use a methodology of tradition histories, of intellectual history, and looked at how this concept came into being, how it evolved over the course of history. Who were the thinkers that ultimately made their mark on the concept? And throughout that process, I think the most interesting and compelling thing, and this is not something that I had sought out to discover, but when you're digging through the history of an idea, some surprising things come to light. And the most surprising thing for me was that in its earliest stages of conceptualization, the prohibition against wastefulness was actually intricately tied into the prohibition against self-harm. And the idea was that just like you're not allowed to harm yourself, so too are you not allowed to harm material things. And it went from the flip side too, just as you're not allowed to harm material things and destroy them, so too are you not allowed to engage in self-harm. Now, this was a really surprising revelation because it was so in tune with what we see today in mainstream environmentalism, where harming the environment is commensurate to harming yourself. And that is the basis of an ethic that we can use for protecting the environment and living in harmony with other people and the rest of the non-human world. It's my hope that that not only this method that I use in terms of analyzing this concept is applied in to a much greater extent on common concepts in faith-based environmental in the field of faith-based environmentalism. The other thing I would say is that I'm a proponent of big tent environmentalism. I think, like the Canadian environmentalist Graham Saul says, there are many different ways, different paths to the environment. And sometimes it's important to find a common one that unites us all, but it's also important to create the paths that will be unique for the people that will follow them. And if there's one that's the more such paths that we can create, the more access people have to living in a world that is able to be in harmony with the environment. So I hope that you'll take a look at the book, and I'd like to again express my deep gratitude to the jury and to the donors. Thank you very much.
At the end of his life, Elie Wiesel said, "From now on, only art and literature will really be able to represent what the Shoah actually was." Laurent Saganovich nous offre aujourd'hui un roman qui touche exactement à la représentation exacte et sensible de l'horreur des camps. Son roman, Le temps des orphelins, décrit l'arrivée d'un jeune rabbin de l'armée américaine aux portes de Buchenwald et découvre l'horreur indicible, et c'est cela le mot essentiel, indicible des camps. Ce roman englobe complètement cette expérience et nous la fait revivre.
Bien, je voulais d'abord, avant tout, remercier le jury qui a eu la bonne idée de couronner mon roman. J'avoue que ça a été une très grande surprise pour moi. Je ne suis pas très familier avec les prix littéraires et je disais courage parce que un roman sur la Shoah, sur l'Holocauste est toujours quelque chose d'éminemment, entre guillemets, casse-gueule, à la fois pour le romancier et pour le lecteur. En fait, moi, quand j'ai commencé ce livre, je savais que j'allais à l'échec. C'était totalement assumé. Je pense très sincèrement que la littérature, le langage, ne pourra jamais restituer avec l'exactitude nécessaire ce qui s'est passé à l'intérieur des camps de concentration, ce qui pouvait bien se passer dans la tête des déportés. Donc, je savais que j'allais à l'échec, mais pour autant, je trouvais que cela valait le coup. C'est-à-dire, je pense qu'il est du devoir désormais des romanciers de ma génération et puis de celle à venir de s'attaquer à l'innommable, même si il faut savoir que nous allons échouer. Ce que je veux dire par là, c'est que à partir du moment où les témoins directs, les déportés en personne ne sont plus en capacité évidemment de témoigner, ils vont disparaître, je ne peux pas me résoudre à ce que leur mémoire soit figée finalement dans l'éternité du temps et que, par principe, par pudeur, on se retienne d'écrire sur eux. Je trouve qu'il est du devoir d'un romancier ou d'un romancier juif de surcroît de s'attaquer à cet indicible, à ce tabou. Et donc, dans ce roman, j'ai inventé ce personnage, enfin, qui a dû exister, hein, ce personnage de rabbin, un jeune rabbin américain qui décide de s'engager comme aumônier auprès des forces armées et qui, à ce titre, va débarquer en Normandie, traverser la France avant d'arriver par hasard un beau matin aux portes de Buchenwald. Et en fait, j'ai choisi aussi le personnage du rabbin parce que il me semble que la question de Dieu et la question du silence de Dieu pendant la Shoah, pendant l'Holocauste, m'est toujours apparue comme l'une des questions les plus cruciales qui ait été posée à l'humanité. C'est-à-dire, comment, après la Shoah, continuer à concilier la foi avec ce spectacle intolérable d'hommes et de femmes livrés à la pire des barbaries sans que jamais un Dieu quelconque n'intervienne. Et il me semble que cette problématique est au cœur de l'histoire de l'humanité, est au cœur de notre identité à nous, et qu'elle nous interroge d'une manière extrêmement profonde et dérangeante sur ce que nous sommes, sur ce que nous pouvons penser, sur ce que nous pouvons créer dans un monde qui semble être désormais un monde sans Dieu possible. Voilà ce que j'ai essayé de faire à travers ce roman. Et donc, je remercie évidemment le jury d'avoir eu oui, cette sorte de courage de le couronner. Alors, j'ai essayé de dire quelques mots en anglais. I would like to say a few words in English. I'm sorry because I am Canadian, but first I am French. I was born in Paris, and as you can know, French people are the worst people to speak a foreign language, and I am the perfect example. So I just gonna say a few words. I'm very honored and proud to receive this prize. And I was telling in French then when I start this novel, who took place inside the concentration camp of Buchenwald. When I started it, I was totally aware that it was gonna be a total failure. I mean by that it is impossible with the only help of the literature of the word to transcribe and to describe with exactitude the mental landscape of the victim of the Holocaust. But still, I do think that it is our duty to us, modern novelists, to try. Even if we're gonna fail, it doesn't matter. We have to try, because otherwise these people are going to stay forever in a kind of silence. And we have to give our support, our voices to make them exist again and again. And the other thing who is inside, at the heart of the book, is the confrontation between a man of faith. My principal character is a rabbi, a young rabbi, a chaplain, and where it's going to discover the horror of Buchenwald. And the question of the book is, how can we conciliate our faith, our humanity, with the spectacle of this horror and the silence of God? So, as you can imagine, it's a very, very funny book. And if by any chance there is a publisher on the other side of the screen who will be interesting to read it and maybe, who knows, translate it, I will be delighted to send you a copy. Well, thank you very much, and that's it.
The Canadian Jewish Literary Award for Biography goes to Hernan Tesler-Mabé for Mahler's Forgotten Conductor, Heinz Unger, and his Search for Jewish Meaning, 1895 to 1965. The Berlin-born orchestral conductor, Heinz Unger, devoted his life to the music of Gustav Mahler. In 1948, Unger settled in Canada and was celebrated for his Mahler interpretations with the Toronto Symphony Orchestra, the Promenade Symphony Orchestra, and most significantly, the CBC Symphony Orchestra. This book explores the way a German Jewish musician understood and expressed his dual identity by way of his allegiance to music and how Jewish cultural values from Europe manifested themselves in Canada. Hernan Tesler-Mabé teaches history at the University of Ottawa. This book is an exploration of the relationship between culture and history. For Professor Tesler-Mabé, it was obviously a labor of love, and it brings to life a significant cultural figure who has been somewhat forgotten and neglected. Professor Tesler-Mabé.
Thank you, Michael. I would like to begin by thanking the adjudicators of the Canadian Jewish Literary Award for selecting my book, Mahler's Forgotten Conductor, Heinz Unger, and his Search for Jewish Meaning, 1895 to 1965, as the best biography of the year. In accepting this award, I would also like to commence by sharing with you how this all began, how this process began for me. As a graduate student studying Jewish culture and identity many years ago, I first came across Heinz Unger's name in a finding aid at Library and Archives Canada in their music division. In reading his brief biographical entry, I asked myself, an avowed lover of Gustav Mahler's music, how I had never heard of this musician who had done so much to advance Mahler's cause in Canada and beyond. Once I began exploring his fauns, in fact that had never been studied by anyone before, I realized that I had stumbled upon something profound. Here was a musician who not only had spent the majority of his life performing Gustav Mahler's music, but a person who, in doing so, problematized our understanding of Jewish identity across the diaspora. Here indeed was a name that barely resonated any longer, and a life whose achievements and whose significance on so many levels, that is on the Jewish, on the Canadian, on the diasporic, on the musical, on the Mahlerian, to name but the main ones, had been completely forgotten. I knew then that here lay a story not only worthy of, but urgently requiring exhumation. For the rest of my graduate years, and then in the years that followed, I considered it my duty to bring Heinz Unger back to life. I am delighted that I have done so, and I'm now able to share his story and its complex meaning with you all. I hope that the readers of my book will appreciate the many ways in which Jewish identity is created and preserved, and will end with a deeper understanding of Heinz Unger's multifaceted identity, as well as perhaps their own identities. Now, I could, of course, not, there's no way I could have gotten through all this without the help of a great many others. So I'd like to, of course, end this with by thanking those who helped me along the way over these many years. Thank you first to Pierre Anctil, who was my supervisor during my doctoral studies in history. Also, I'd like to thank my colleagues in the history department at the University of Ottawa for their collegiality and support, and to the Ontario Graduate Scholarship for the support that they provided me in the early years of my research. I also want to thank Len Husband at the University of Toronto Press, who spent years with me and in that time became a dear friend as we refined this manuscript. Also to the varied Jewish Canadian Studies program at the University of Ottawa for its financial support. To my family, both the Tesler-Mabés and the Kemenis alike, who supported me in more ways than I can even begin to elucidate here. And to my wife, Mandy, who listened to me talk through my ideas, read countless drafts, and put up with all sorts of headaches as I fretted over this manuscript's fate. Finally, I should take this opportunity to express my gratitude for the work that Heinz Unger himself did in his life, and acknowledge the challenges that he confronted and overcame in his service of Gustav Mahler and his music. I only wish that his daughter Ines Johnston, with whom I spent many hours speaking about her father, could also be with us to share this honor. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, these are the Canadian Jewish Literary Award honorees for this year. Thank you for honoring the best in Canadian Jewish writing for 2020. This afternoon's celebration gala will stay on the Canadian Jewish Literary Awards YouTube channel. There will be an enhanced conversation with many of the authors. Enjoy. Please buy the books we honor and come to our website, CJL Awards, that's cjlawards.ca, to donate. The Canadian Jewish Literary Awards thanks you.